I don't know how I'm going to do today without Miami. The dog. I gotta come get the dog for a day or two. I want to. I'm like, I
honestly think it's
very forceful. She dragged me out.
Bob, I got the mic. Tom's working on getting into that.
All right. So my experiment is, once that's, you can go on Zoom now. But I'm gonna have to change the microphone. I'll show you on YouTube how you change the mic setting so it picks up that mic. Zoom, I'm sorry.
No, it is.
Oy, oy, oy.
If you're having problems.
Okay, Boker Tov to everybody. Give us a chance while we're setting up. Glad that you've joined us on Zoom.
Don't bother me.
We'll do some technical. If you do me a favor, if you could mute yourself if you're on Zoom, that would be great so we can get the sound in the room organized. That would be wonderful.
It won't let you control it.
They will eventually. I apologize.
You can hear it.
Okay.
I don't know whether you do the microphone with or without. It should be working.
No, this one.
Anybody raising a hand? No?
Can you hear us on this mic, guys? Who are on Zoom? You just raise your hand if you can hear us. Can you guys hear us right now? Can you just raise your hand if you can hear us?
Yes.
Test, test.
Oh.
We have two cameras.
I do have a conference microphone here, and I'm trying not to pick it up on, well, I guess it's working because I can hear it on my computer. So that's Fine. Right, so you can keep your images up because you'll be on the gallery, as you see behind me. And the conference microphone hopefully will pick this up so everybody doesn't have to mute on and off and play that game. And we'll see how that works, or we'll shuffle the microphone around. First time I've used one, we'll see how that goes. So
We should be on mute.
welcome, everyone. Good to see you here.
Okay.
Microphone, am I on mute? Probably not.
Create a feedback loop.
Right, well, right now it's not feeding back, so I'll give it a second. We'll open that.
Was there a link?
All right, welcome to our
Yeah.
special program today. I'm choose by choice, and we have some wonderful participants, Anne Marie, Javier, Tom, and Brian. All will have the opportunity to share some of their story and share some questions that Brian helped me to produce. I took his lead on that. So it's not really an in-depth or an opportunity to put anyone in the hot seat. It's more about giving everyone an understanding of their circumstance and or how they're dealing with the circumstance of today. How do we deal with being or accepting Judaism and participating and the challenges that we face with it? And of course, there can be many challenges, especially at this time of year. We call it the Christmas dilemma. What shall be in your house? How should you celebrate? How do you deal with your past history? How do you feel about those questions? And what does that really mean for you and your family and so on and so forth? Barbara, do you remember, was it Julius? Was What was last name? Jules was an Amherst professor. I knew an Amherst professor from Amherst who was a Black man, and he chose Judaism. And as an intellectual, he explored Judaism in all of its depths and beauty and dilemmas. And he wrote several books about that and took on the conversion for his family. So being a Black Jew made it even more challenging. He had a chance to meet him and speak and learn from his perspective. So coming from an academic point of view, because he wasn't academic, or just choosing to make Judaism your choice as to the theology you're going to follow in personal practice is one path. And then there are many other paths that people can take. So our panel here is going to help us discuss some of those things. I've encouraged Brian to kind of moderate some of the questions, and I'll play people choosing to get on here. I'll do a little IT work so that we can move that forward. So welcome forward. There'll be a chance for Q&A for a chance. So Brian will do some discussions and people will share their stories, and then we'll hold our thoughts and we'll go from there. And people will have a chance on Zoom also to ask questions if they wish to do that. So Brian, have you found a question there? Do you think we could start with?
Sure, I mean, I guess, so Javier and Anne Marie are just getting on here to the Zoom. But I guess let's start with just, sort of the background story for each of us, sort of why did we decide to convert and how did we get to this point? How do you want to lead it
Okay,
off?
well, I guess I'm the only one on at the moment, so that by default, I will start. Why did I choose to become Jewish? It was primarily because I was the only one left in the family who wasn't. And I didn't want to be, an asterisk to our Jewish identity anymore. When I met my wife, she was Jewish. She was born and raised in Manhattan, daughter of a Holocaust survivor, strongly identified as a secular and cultural Jew, a Zionist, but not especially observant, at all. So when we moved to, well, as she pointed out, in New York, you can coast on being a cultural Jew pretty easily. But when we moved to the suburbs and the kids started going to school and they came back and said, well, so-and-so is a Catholic and so-and-so is, a Protestant, what are we? That sort of thing. And then after a visit to my grandparents, who are both Christian, I'll tell more about that later. One of my daughters came back with a little book about Jesus that my mother had given her. So at that point, Sylvia says she swung into action and found Temple Israel and joined and, sent our kids to Hebrew school. And my older daughter was bar mitzvahed, and then, but I was not allowed to participate at that time. I couldn't be on the bima. So when my younger daughter,
Was that here?
yeah.
Yeah.
When it was her turn, I decided I didn't want to be an outsider anymore.
Wow,
So that's a basic motivation.
amazing. Thanks. Anne Marie, are you ready?
Pictures here.
So for me, Evan and I were together for 20 years, and it was a journey. And I got to know his family's flavor of Judaism, their traditions, but it really started long before that, where I was raised Catholic, and I never ever felt Catholic. So a story that my dad used to tell is that I was about 3 or 4 years old, and they were giving the announcements at the end of Mass, and I thought it was God giving the announcements. And he's like, "No, Emery, really, God doesn't care when the men's club is meeting." So then the next time was like a year or two later, where I was so confused. I was about 5 years old, and I said, "Oh, we believe in cannibalism," when they were doing the body and blood of Christ. And like from there on, my dad's nickname for me was Thomas, as in Doubting Thomas, because I believed nothing. And so it was like this kind of this central part, I think, of me, that I could not be Christian. So the two combined, and I had no urgency, I guess, to convert, because Evan's family was accepting that I was there for the holidays and things like that. So I definitely was on the slow and steady route of conversion, the 20-year plan. So yeah, that was really for me the process.
Thanks. Javier? Javier got a very unique story. Go ahead, Javier.
Yeah, very. So my story began actually as early as when I was in high school. I started out in a public school, and then I transitioned myself to a private Catholic school for my last 2 years of high school, so my junior and my senior year. There, in order to graduate, you have to take a religion class. You have to, you have to learn and pass that class. But I was very, I wouldn't say argumentative, but I would debate a lot of the facts that I was told, because it would contradict what I would read on my own, or for example, in the Old Testament. It just wouldn't match. And whenever I would ask a question, I would get a very vague response and answer, which then led me to feel vague and on my own. I was not connecting whatsoever, although I was raised Catholic my whole life. But being raised Catholic by very strict Catholic, Hispanic grandparents and parents, it's different, because it's almost like it's not your like, it's almost you're kind of forced into it. The culture.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's Sunday morning, get dressed, go to church.
And that's it.
Yep.
So exactly. So it was very difficult. So I, on my own, began to disconnect myself. And really just by asking questions and not getting good answers, it made me disconnect faster. So I really appreciated the fact that I put myself in that situation, learned what I learned, and I'm glad I didn't connect. And then when I started learning about other religions on my own, and with friends that I had at the time, I realized that the simplicity and what I liked about Judaism was kind of like what I was almost naturally leaning to on my own. And from there, I started to learn. And then I think from college, once I graduated high school and college and on, I on my own, I said at some point I'm going to convert. But I was like, I gotta finish college first and get things together, and then I'll do that. Yeah, that's for me. That's when it started. It was more just a disconnect with what I was raised in.
My story is sort of more traditional, you know, boy meets girl. We grew up, my wife and I grew up in Glen Rock, and my wife's family was not pleased that she was dating somebody who wasn't Jewish, and push came to shove, and we did, you know, classes on the Upper West Side, and then went through the process in Hoboken. You know, they now tolerate me, but that's, you know, all that can be expected, right? No, I'm teasing, but you know, so that's you know, very, very different than the other folks here, because I was a different point in my life, and B, you know, it's a different thing. I was actually raised atheist. My parents are, you know, atheist in the tradition of religion is the opiate of the masses and has caused more wars than any other factor in human history. And so it was a different set of challenges that I had to overcome, you know, in converting, and certainly the, I think as it's usually described, or as it was described in the classes I was taking at least, you know, Judaism can tolerate a lot of beliefs about God as long as you don't believe there's more than one. There can be none, there can't be more than one. So that certainly made it more open and more of an option for me at that point in my life. So, you know, so, and I think everyone sort of hit on the different dilemmas they had in making that decision, right? It's a hard decision, and it's a process. I'd actually love to hear a little bit more, just briefly, about classes that people took. Like, where did you study, and what are the memories you have of those classes? And the reason I ask is because it's funny, we were actually just going through some papers in our house, and we found the notes that, so my wife and I took these classes together, right? When it's young people, you usually take the classes together. I don't know if you guys took them with your spouses or not.
I did, yeah.
But it was a great experience, and we found all our notes, and a lot of the notes are things like, is this guy kidding? Like, because we were writing about the other people in the room, right? And I remember sitting and gossiping and having a great time, like sitting in class and talking about all the other people. And it's funny to think about where some of those people would be now. But one of the profound things, I think, in taking classes as an adult and going through the process, and I'd love to hear the other panelists feel the same, I think the one thing that people who convert have that's unique is that by going through those classes as adults, we come to recognize how much different people do Jewish differently, right? And so one of the things for the Jewish spouse in each of those classes was like when we got to Passover, right? Everybody thought Passover was done the way their family did Passover. And all of a sudden, everyone realized they had this opportunity as a young adult to say, wait a second, these people are building a tent in their living room. These people are reading the Maxwell Haggadah, and these people are doing something totally different. And so what is right? What do we want to do for our family? And so I think that's a really profound thing as an adult to be able to, or as a young adult or an older adult to be able to do, because it really gives you the openness to understand and to make the experience your own, right? And it's the same thing with the high holidays and everything else. You have people in the class who go from the range of, you know, after Yom Kippur, we went out for lunch, to, you know, the people who, you know, did all kinds of other things. So it's a, I think that really opens people up, but I'd love to hear what other people took away from the classes as far as that's concerned, and also sort of where you studied. So we'll walk down, Tom.
Well, we took classes with an individual. It wasn't a group class.
Okay.
We started when Rabbi Marins was our
Mhm.
rabbi. And I can't remember the guy's name. He was in Teaneck. He was an older guy. And that was kind of his thing, was to give conversion classes. And
Stephen Lerner.
yes, Stephen Lerner. And then for some, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, his name was Stephen Lerner. He lived in Teaneck. And then we didn't finish with him. And then we got a new rabbi, Gil Steinloff. And after maybe a few months or a year, I don't remember exactly, we picked it up again with his wife as the teacher, Batya. Again, just, Sylvia and I with her alone. Yeah, I don't remember too much about, the classes. We learned the basics, the basic stories and principles. But
Yeah.
Yeah, some people have said to me that I probably know more about Judaism as a convert than a lot of, natural born Jews, possibly. I challenge that, but anyway, that's my experience.
Very well, maybe true. Javier.
I took my conversion class in Hoboken
Hmm.
with my wife,
With Rabbi Scheinberg,
with Rabbi Scheinberg. Yes.
same class.
Yeah. It was
Before he was all white.
yeah.
He used to have
Oh,
dark
no,
hair.
yeah. It was definitely I would say like the basics. Yeah. Also, it was, I like the group setting of it because everyone I felt was on the same boat as I was,
Mhm.
and learning as much as you can in, like, I don't know, a couple months.
Mhm.
And that, to me, at that moment, I remember, and for my wife, was very intimidating. And we were trying to be like very studious, at that time, taking massive amounts of notes that we had no idea what it was. And then just going back home and Googling everything that we were, like hearing at that moment. But, it was a good time, we also used to it used to be after work time when we used to go. So we'd be hungry, people would bring snacks. So we'd be looking forward to that whenever we get off in Hoboken. But yeah, it was a great experience. I wish, there was, to me at least, I wish it was a continuous thing because I like that group setting of learning. So.
Maria?
I didn't take classes. I worked with Rabbi Hein.
Mhm.
He just kept handing me another tome and another tome. And it asked me weekly if I had any questions. And then he learned that he had to ask me a different question, which was, did you fall down any rabbit holes this week? And because that would be, like Javier says, the, Googling. So yeah, after I got done with reading the history of Judaism, which is about Yotzek, and there was like 3 or 4 other books, plus I did his history of Judaism class, and started coming every week on Friday. That was basically my process, and then he called me one day and said, "Okay, we're going to the Mikvah. Can you be there on this date?" And that was kind of the process.
Fascinating. What were some of the rabbit holes?
Oh, everything. I mean, I'm a librarian. Every paragraph is a rabbit hole. I really enjoyed the observant life, reading that. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, I enjoyed reading the observant life. I liked getting the kind of more official position, as opposed to, like I said, my process was a 20-year process. And the flavor of Judaism was the Fleischmann flavor. for the most part. And learning that, like you said, everyone does Passover different. It was, honey, we're almost down to a picture book at your family's house, right? Of, you know.
Yeah, well, they signed us all up for speed reading class.
Yeah. And so, then when you had, when you realize, oh, there's actually prayers to do after dinner. Oh, imagine, you know, like these are the kind of things that as I learned, then I of course had to go and do more research and figure out, what do I want to do? Yeah.
Can you describe what your experience was like at the Mikvah? Were they helpful when you got there? Because I know there's a whole process to it, and depending on what Mikvah you go to, it can be a different experience altogether. Did you go to Teaneck?
No. I
So
went
I'm
to-
not sure if the mic's picking this up. Sylvia asked the experience of the mikvah. Go ahead.
Barbara.
I'm sorry. Barbara asked the experience of the mikvah. Anne Marie, sorry. I'm looking
So
at
we
this,
went to
looking at that.
Westchester. We had a Benedict in the parking lot with the snow during COVID. Alla was my Mikvah lady. And she's like, oh, just jump in and swim around a little. And so then once everybody was all set, and probably the most humorous thing was when Rabbi Fine said to me, well, if you don't remember the prayers, they're on the wall. Well, if anybody knows me, if I don't have my contacts in, which you can't have, there is no reading anything on the wall. Matter of fact, there's no reading anything here either. So that was, for me, that was stressful, but the mikvah part was fine. You know, because it was in the middle of COVID, so it was basically Alla and I in the mikvah, so I didn't have to worry about a different person. Like it was somebody I knew or was familiar with. Yeah. But it is a little weird to have men standing outside the door while you're swimming around naked.
Is that the rabbi was waiting for you outside?
Three of them. They were right outside the door. And so that's a little bit
To
odd.
witness.
Yes.
the Conversion, is that?
To hear you say the prayers. Yes.
Oh.
All right.
Okay, can I watch?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
I'm a woman, what's it like for the men?
I can't
Brian, you might
remember.
want to repeat questions because I don't know some people can hear you.
Follow-up question also about the mikvah to the gentleman on the panel.
Yeah, I don't remember if anyone, I guess there must have been somebody witnessing me, right? But
I don't remember it at all. Blocked it out.
Yeah, it was-
No, certainly not something that was meaningful to me, at
Yeah.
least. I don't know about anybody else. Did anyone feel that it was a meaningful ritual?
Oh, yeah.
I did. I
Yeah?
did. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
in the sense that, like everything else in Judaism, it's something that people have been doing for thousands of years. So, whether you expect it or not, it is kind of moving at that moment.
Mhm.
What about your experience?
As I said, I don't really have any vivid memories of it. We went to Teaneck, we went out to lunch afterwards. I probably remember lunch better than the rest of it. But I had a formal bet din, right, with like 3 rabbis, and that was the more intimidating part, right? Because Rabbi Scheinberg was one of them, and then the rabbi from Glen Rock at the time, who knew Marcy's family, was one of them, and who I knew. So they were okay, but the third was somebody we didn't know, but that we also knew was going to ask certain questions. So I had to be prepared for those questions, and there was a whole, that was probably a half an hour process for me.
Right.
Of sitting around a table and answering questions. And the question I had to prepare for that he was going to ask was, if I walk in your home, how would I know that you're Jewish? That was the question to prepare for. My answer was a mezuzah and bookshelf were the 2 answers. I've certainly kept those. I have the bookshelf right by the door with a lot of books on it, including some Jewish ones and a mezuzah. So,
Brian, can we get into some of the challenges now people that convert?
Yes. So yeah, let's so let's well, actually, Bob, I want to just start with, what was the first time you really felt Jewish? Right? What was the experience you had where you first really felt Jewish? And we'll go in reverse order. So Anne Marie, you want to start with stuff?
Well, because we're on the mikvah, I would say after you do that, you're Jewish. I mean,
Okay.
at that point, you've, like you said, you've been grilled for 30 minutes.
Mhm.
And, you know, you better be serious at that point. So I would definitely say, yeah, after the
Okay.
mikvah.
Javier?
For me, absolutely the same thing. That day, the mikvah day for me and my family, for us, it was a family event. My wife came, my oldest son, Sebastian, who's currently in Hebrew school right now here somewhere, and my son, Simon, we all went at the same time. Not at the same time, but back to back to back. And yeah, that day, once I got dressed, came out of the room, it was like a rebirth. And believe it or not, my oldest son, Sebastian, by the time was like, I don't know, 12 or something, 11, he told me the same thing. And to hear it from him made me feel even better.
Mhm.
You know, the fact how accepting he was of things and how excited more so he was about it was the most excited. So at that point, I felt like not only I, but my entire family was.
What, Charlie? Liver?
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about this much. I was going to say, well, first of all, yes, probably after the mikvah, I felt the closest I felt to being really Jewish. Another time was at my daughter's bat mitzvah.
Mhm.
And the third time is when my wife and I had a Jewish wedding for our 30th wedding
Oh,
anniversary.
wow. That's cool.
But the rest of the time, I don't really feel Jewish. I mean, I think I'll never feel really Jewish. I am always going to feel like not an imposter really, but I'll just never be. I think I think you're born, if you don't grow up with it, which I didn't. My parents were, if you read the flyer, I'm a product of a mixed marriage. My father was Irish Catholic, my mother was German Protestant. They went to separate churches their entire life. I had to go with my father until I went off to college, and then I stopped going altogether. I never bought into it. And, you know, I'm essentially an atheist. But I just don't, I'll never feel like a real Jew.
So for me, it was many years later, right? It was actually, and it's actually an external, right? I think I was actually on the board here before I ever felt Jewish. It was a dad's night thing, right? So we have this organization in Ridgewood where we do something with the elementary schools where the dads get together, and somebody, I don't remember what the issue was. Somebody said something about synagogues in town, and one of the guys one of the chairmen at the time, who is Jewish, but Jewish sort of culturally, right? And he said from the stage in front of these hundreds of people, you know, if you have any questions about being Jewish in Ridgewood, Brian Delator is the person to talk to. That was the first time I really felt Jewish, right? It was like, oh, now I'm the guy people are going to come to, right? But you know, and I think it leads perfectly. Tom's comments lead perfectly into kind of the next thing, which is what are the most challenging things, right? I think we all probably experience these moments where we feel like a poser, right? You almost feel like you're not really belonging. For me, language is one of the big ones. A lot of people like to, it's not so much the prayer, right? For me, at least, and hear from everybody, but for me, it's not the prayer that's in Hebrew. It's the people like to be quote unquote cool by throwing in a Yiddish phrase or throwing in a Hebrew phrase. Like that makes people feel like they're part of the tribe, right? And it brings people together. But when you do that, right, for people who either haven't studied that or haven't been raised with that, it can be very much a barrier, right? And so one of the things we work on here is actually trying to avoid some of that in the things we write in the Hebrew school, for instance, which I'm in charge of because, somebody who never went to Hebrew school is the first person to run a Hebrew school. We avoid putting in the emails things like that, right? And so if you're going to use a word in Yiddish or in Hebrew, you want to define it because there's a lot of people reading the email who may not know what that word means. And it's a way to be more accepting. And for me, that's really been something that both I notice a lot and that is the thing that keeps me, that always intimidates, right? Is when there's something being said that you don't know what it means and you're almost expected to know what it means, but it can be very intimidating. Tom, you already spoke, but if you have anything else to add to that.
Having one of the, I don't know if this is the same question, but we had to tell my parents that we were going to raise our kids Jewish. I'm an only child, so we broke the news to my mother, and she said, well, to be honest, I would have been more upset if you decided to raise your kids Catholic. So it was like a neutral, neutral field. But yeah, the Hebrew, of course, is a challenge. Again, in synagogue, I didn't know, I still don't know what's going on most of the time. Where are we now in the service? I mean, over the years, I've sort of gotten familiar with some of the sequence, but reading the English translation of the prayers, like I said, I'm an atheist, so it doesn't resonate with me what we're actually saying, or what the people who are saying the prayers are saying, because I don't buy that, I guess. But it is, sorry? My father, yeah, he was okay with it, I guess. I don't think he was happy. I mean, he wasn't overjoyed, but the other thing that's interesting is that there was I felt a certain anti-Semitism coming from myself. Because I grew up in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I must have known there were some Jews who lived there, but I didn't know any. And, you absorb the cultural, just kind of a baseline background anti-Semitism, people speak disparagingly of Jews, or talking about somebody, making a deal, oh, he Jewed him down. My father would use those expressions. So it's hard to it's always kind of there in the background, even though rationally you reject it. But so that was, it's always been a bit of a problem, I would say.
Javier?
For me, challenges have been honestly the learning curve. It's almost like a catch-up of years, and I have a lot of respect for the traditions and what I'm supposed to know, like the basics, and what I should just want to learn on my own. For us, it's been a lot to try to catch up. I've actually had a lot of good help from some of the members here, which I really appreciate. To mention one name, Miss Mary Schachter. There was one day she provided me, I don't know, I would say a little over almost like 10 books. And it served very well during the pandemic, which I had a lot of time. And they were very interesting. Actually, I still have one in my book bag that I take, during my commute to work. But yeah, trying to learn, trying to catch up, trying to understand certain, conversations I hear it's still difficult. It's still a process. It's still something I'm trying to, trying to catch up, but it's very interesting. Like I said, I respect it and I want to learn. I feel like my son Sebastian, who is in Hebrew school, is learning a lot quicker than I am. And believe it or not, my wife and I ask him a lot of questions, and he knows the answers. So that's kind of like where we are right now. And we have babies now that we want to teach. So like our learning has to be a lot faster now. So this is the challenging part that I have right now for myself. Sebastian's 14 at the moment. Yeah.
And Marie?
Yeah, definitely what you were saying, Brian, about the throwing around of Hebrew terms in the middle of an English sentence. That's and then trying to remember what the word was when you can, go home and Google it
Mhm.
so that you can be like, oh, okay, now I know what that is. Yeah, that's tough. And I agree with what Javier said about, the learning curve. It's pretty steep. And just trying to learn like the Hebrew words, I have my little flashcards I have on my desk every week. There's 10 more words. I feel like I'm going back to second grade.
Wow.
So that eventually I'll conquer the first, 1,000 most common words in the Torah. But, we're only at like 300 something right now. So yeah, the Hebrew is definitely a challenge. I have great respect for everyone who went to Hebrew school, of that they're learning a language along with the pillars of a religion, where growing up and going to Sunday school, we learned just the pillars. It was dogma, it was creed, it was no language involved. So the fact that in Judaism, everybody that went to Hebrew school, they learned two major things at the same time. I have tremendous respect for.
Yeah. I just want to make one other comment, and then we're going to talk Christmas, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Or is that sound right? What we're supposed to be done at 11:30, Bob? Perfect. So one of the other big challenges that I find, and this goes, I think it's an interesting problem, right? Is that, to me, the hardest people to talk to when you convert are actually the people who are cultural Jews. Because for them, Judaism isn't a religion, right? And so it's very hard to explain to somebody why you converted into a culture or a tradition instead of into a religion. And it can be an that actually, to me, ends up being the biggest barrier, right? And we see it in things like Israel's policy towards people who convert, right? Which is extremely prejudiced against people who convert in a liberal, in reform or conservative circles. But in some ways, that's almost easier, because that's just saying there's a religious standard, right? But for someone who is walking down the Upper East Side, right, and eating a bagel on Saturday morning and thinks that's what being Jewish is, they really can never understand how somebody can convert to being Jewish, because for them, it's just something they grew up knowing they were, but that they don't do anything about, right? And so it's interesting, because you have the challenge on the religious side and you have the challenge on sort of the cultural side. And it's really just the people in the middle who are participating in being Jewish or doing Jewish, who aren't far right, aren't super orthodox, who can sort of understand where we all fall. And so then let's just talk Christmas real quick, because it is the season. Christmas dilemma, obviously anybody who's in a family that has people from multiple faith traditions has this issue, and Christmas, of course, being the dominant cultural force. For us, it was probably one of the mistakes we made, was we overemphasized shutting down Christmas. And we've become much more lenient as we progress through our 4 children. And at first we were very strict, and then we've certainly liberalized that, because we've realized that living a Jewish life is really the way that you get your kids to want to live a Jewish life, not by shutting down what their grandparents are doing or keeping them from something else. So for us, it's evolved to be much more tolerant. We 106.7 is definitely the radio station on in our car at this point. Tom?
Yeah, growing up as a kid, Christmas was never really about the birth of Jesus. It was about the tree and the
Yeah.
presents,
Yeah.
And as our kids were getting older, we felt like to shut it down, and to not do Christmas was, first of all, like a slap in the face to my parents. So we would have a tree and presents, and we would do Hanukkah too. And my wife describes being growing up in New York, where her best friends, both Jews from Germany, they had the best Christmas tree in the building. It was a seasonal holiday. It was not so much a religious holiday. So it wasn't really a problem, I would say.
Yeah.
We kind of
Probably the right way to do it.
finessed it.
Javier?
I don't think it was much of an issue, actually, or it is much of an issue. Hanukkah, like my kids, like my oldest, he loves Hanukkah now more so. It's 8 presents, I have 4 kids, so it got pretty pricey. But I do have family, who, obviously were raised Catholic, like my sister, she's Catholic, she celebrates Christmas. So yeah, we didn't, shut it down at all. We don't really have a tree or anything like that at home, but we do this thing. Well, my sister does this thing for us where she calls it Christmaka, and she sets up the house kind of like that, and we come over, and she has gifts for like my kids and her nephews and stuff, and that's about it. Yeah.
Your kids' cousins celebrate Christmas, so that's a smart.
Right. But my oldest is very, he's very aware. He's aware. But the babies, they're gonna grow up. Hanukkah. That's it. Right. So they'll know, and we're trying our best to like, we have this thing called PJ Library that has great books for them. So we're kind of drilling it pretty good, but in a fun way.
Anne-Marie?
I have like just a simple philosophy that you follow what Miss Manners has to say, and you base it on the recipient. And so, of course, I give my mother a Christmas present. She celebrates Christmas, she gets a Christmas present. When she chooses to give me a present so far outside of Hanukkah that has Christmas paper on it, I gracefully accept and say nothing, and really, I don't think much more about it. Will I ever host Christmas? No. But, I go to her house. When you walk into her house, that's what it is, And I guess one of my little, pet peeves is like the seasonal greetings, like you should know your friends when you send a Christmas card that they're Christian, and when you send a Hanukkah card that they're celebrate Hanukkah, and so that's kind of my philosophy, and the lights are pretty, and the, songs are a little catchy. So it's kind of the way I look at it. And Rhiannon, she's kind of the little one, the granddaughter, she's walking the line. And Javier, I don't know if you've done this with the twins, who are almost exactly the same age, but she thought that we're lighting candles and we're opening a present every night for 8 days was the best thing. And on the 9th day, it was a little rough.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you mean there's no open today? So, yeah, that's kind of what we.
Just wait till she's older and you got to do it on a school night. It's really bad.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
bad, 'cause I don't get home until like 8:45
the
at
worst.
night, so she got to stay up late. So
Yeah.
we have presents and staying up late till
Yeah.
grandma gets home, so.
Really
It
not.
was a double whammy.
Not well thought out. So yeah, let's open the floor. And we'll start in the room, and then if people online want to either post a question in the chat or just raise your hand, Bob will, or you can unmute yourself and ask. We'll call on you. Bob Dorkin. And I'm going to repeat the question after you ask it, so in case they can't hear.
Okay. So how did your close family and friends react when you told them you decided to become Jewish?
So Bob Dorkin asked, how did your close family or close friends and family react when you decided to become Jewish? I'll start. Family was sort of walked along over time. My friends thought it was amusing because a lot of them were Jewish. I grew up with a lot of friends who were Jewish in Glen Rock. I was the kid who, when we did the, once the kid, in high school, somebody would get to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I was always the kid who left out under God when we did the Pledge of Allegiance, even if I was on the mic for the whole school, right? And so they found it very amusing, but have certainly been, helpful and supportive in the process as well.
Well, we didn't really send out announcements or make a big deal of it. People just kind of found out one by one, and if nobody really, they might have been curious or mildly surprised, but pretty much there was no problem. And everyone was pretty tolerant, I guess is the word.
Yeah, same for me. Everybody was very accepting. I didn't announce that either. I just kind of said on the fly. If people ask me, wait, how come you're wearing that on your head? Well, I'm Jewish. That's it. And everybody was accepting of it. No issues. Yeah, I was very happy about that. Very supportive family though. So.
For me, some people said, "Oh, we thought you converted years ago." I probably was invited from my girlfriends, a number of who are Jewish, to join their temple. My mom, I think she probably was happy I had some religion, any religion, because I had so shunned the religion as a child. So yeah, but I think there was definitely a difference between telling my mom and the follow-up. Like she didn't totally lose it when I told her, but then I don't know if she thinks it's kind of like a diet where, you waver back and forth, or you decide one day I'm not going to diet anymore. I don't know. But yeah, some of her later comments were not nice. So, yeah.
I would going to add that later, at one point, my mother made it clear. We had a discussion one evening. I don't know how it came about, but she was pretty convinced that, she gently said that she believed that we were all going to end up in hell. No judgment. But, she was nice about it, but that was her belief. She believed it. My father, I don't know, he didn't know what to believe.
Any other questions? Silva.
I'm curious, how did you feel when you said that? I can imagine that. Curious to know.
How did I feel when she said that? Well, I was shocked. I knew she was pretty devout Lutheran, but I didn't know that she was that committed, But you know, that's just what they believe. To me, that's, you know, I guess a lot of people believe that, but. Yes.
Bob Smolin.
Sorry.
If you found someone who came to you and said, I'm interested in Judaism, where do I go? What should I do? I'm scared or nervous. How would you direct them?
Direct them to Brian
No,
immediately.
I don't know, can you imagine that? The only Jew in the place, you, Jew. Answer the question. Don't feel serious, don't feel self-conscious. How would you advise, Anne Marie? How would you encourage, discourage, advise? How would you deal with someone who came to you and said, I'm unsure whether I should pursue this? What do I do?
I think I would definitely encourage them and ask some questions about whether or not they've explored it at all, whether they're ready to, like, you know, find a rabbi, find a conversion class. Well, I shouldn't say conversion class, an intro to Judaism class, to learn more, because everyone has their own road and where they are on it. So try to meet them where they are. But I would definitely encourage it.
Yeah, I definitely encourage it as well. I mean, I would want to know, you know, like you said, I would ask questions, but I would want to know more inside, like what are they feeling that's making them even think this, you know, because for me, that's what it was. Everything was inside. So I would want to know what's bringing this to, even for them to say, should I do this? I feel like that's very important. That part's the most important to me. Everything else, you know, it's like, you know, steps, but if it's real inside, then all of that will be super easy and, you know, you'll breeze through it.
I don't know if Sharon can hear it. Sharon?
Yeah, Sharon.
If you
Hear
are,
her, because I think Evan killed the sound on mine.
All right, I'll turn mine on. Hang on.
I don't know.
Sharon, hang on one sec.
sure.
You can go for you, Brian, I'm not sure.
Sharon, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Great. If you grew up in the metropolitan area, you might not be aware that in less populated parts of this country, I don't think many Christians are aware that Jews don't believe in the divinity of Jesus. They know they have all sorts of stereotypes about Jews, but I don't think this actually reaches their consciousness. And the way this came to me was walking to school with my best friend in a Lutheran town, and I mean almost totally Lutheran. If you weren't Lutheran, you were Jehovah's Witness. And walking with my girlfriend home, and we got to be talking about religion, and it became clear that I did not believe in the divinity of Jesus. And she gave me this sad, sad look. And with deep, deep feeling, she said, "Oh, Sharon, you're going to hell." And, you know, she meant it profound sympathy for me. You know, it was going to be so awful for me, and I was her friend. And I don't know, you know, I grew up in a rural area where we were the only Jewish family for about 60 miles. So this did not surprise me. But I think for people who are grow up in areas that Jewish cultural identity is very strong, may not realize this.
Yeah, definitely. The question was just in the Lake Wobegon part of the world, whether that it would be very different to go through this process, and definitely a good observation, because yeah, we all did this in the New York metropolitan area, which certainly made it easier.
Mhm.
Well, I did my conversion here, but I grew up in rural New York, and
Right.
yeah, there was, you know, a few Jewish families.
Mhm.
But it's all, if you don't see something, then sometimes it's just not even on the radar. So I definitely didn't have the same experience that Sharon did. It was just, it wasn't on the radar because I think the nearest temple was probably about 15 miles away, and it was probably a pretty small one. So it wasn't something that you saw. As a matter of fact, when Evan and I first started dating, and we got into, I guess, a little spat one time about getting the Jewish holidays off of school. Now, when you grow up somewhere that there's two families, like, they're not going to give you the day off school. So I had no idea what he was talking about, where he grew up in Rockland County. So it was like, to me, I'm like, well, why would you get the days off school? You know, why would you let 1,000 kids out for, 2 kids? Where, I had to come to that place that, it was very different upbringing.
Evan, you had a question.
Yeah, if, other than, this is what my spouse did, I'm curious how did you come to the egalitarian conservative flavor of Judaism when you were making your choice?
The question is, how did we choose egalitarian conservative Judaism? For me, it's what my spouse did. I assume the same.
Well, we moved to Ridgewood, the Ridgewood area, and this was the temple. And we liked the Rabbi Marins. Oddly enough, even though I am sort of I would say reluctant Jew, but I would never want to be a Reformed Jew. It's like not the real thing. And conservative, well, and rather Orthodox Judaism is also, that's too, I reject orthodoxy of any, flavor in any religion. So this was a natural choice. Middle of the road.
Yeah, no, for me, the same, yes, this was the temple close to where I live and my family live, but I love the rabbi here. It was, I think, just the community here. Yes, it's conservative, but the community here made me feel, well, like this is where I belong. So it was very easy. Yeah, it wasn't a choice of which one to pick. It was just, I think it was just based on the community.
Yeah, I think that was a lot for Evan and I when we were looking, and this is where Evan kind of took the lead a little bit. He didn't want to repeat what he was brought up with and reform. So conservatism seemed to be the right path, because being Orthodox, I don't think would work for us.
You weren't ready to move on.
Yeah.
Could I just add also, the people who we met here as we were thinking about joining we made a lot of good friends here. So that was a big part of it, the social connections.
Anyone on Zoom have any more questions, Brian?
Yeah, does anybody any other questions? I don't think so. So Bob, you want to get on and wrap things up?
First of all, I wanted to thank.
Well, you got to stay in front of your computer.
Oh,
Otherwise
I
people
stand for my
can't see
computer to
you.
be seen?
Yeah.
Okay. Stand for my computer to be seen. I want to thank our panelists. I wanted to thank them not only for willing to participate, but there's a certain bit of internal courage that takes us in front of an audience and talk a little bit about your own personal Jewish journey. And pride, I hope, as well, about that, and level of comfort, and this temple for being the Hamisher place that it is. So I think that's, friendly, family, familiar, comfortable, warm, outgoing, sweet, all of those good pieces to do that. So that makes this place particularly special because of the way people treated each other. But my personal thanks to you to do this and share this, and for everyone on Zoom or anyone in our audience. If there are people out there that are concerned or have issues or want to know more, I would encourage them, as you said, Anne Marie, to ask questions or just come here or bring someone with you or come visit, or I'm sure Rabbi Fine would always be willing to talk to anyone that would be having interest. It's, you know, Judaism comes about in different ways, as you said, through relationships and or possibility your own inquiry. My wife reminded me of Julius Irving, who was a professor, I understand he passed away from his open, which I did not know, but so it's one piece to take an academic path, it's another to take one of her relationships. And then the interesting piece which you mentioned, not to bring it back up, is that transferring your beliefs or practices now into your family, transferring it to your children. How you'll raise your children, what will they do? Is Lester. Not Julius Irving, different one.
That's a good basketball player.
Julius Lester. You're right. But transferring this to your kids and generation to generation, I think that makes this exceptional. So this is a very, really positive opportunity for us to have this kind of dialogue. And I encourage you, I hope we can have this dialogue again and perhaps have more people learn and participate and know more and appreciate the richness of our traditions and practices and understand that where Judaism functions in our world and the joys from it. And I hope that you all feel joy at different times, whether it's Hanukkah or Passover, maybe not Yom Kippur is joyous, but there are many joyous opportunities throughout the year for us all to celebrate. My grandchildren who go to Jewish preschool can't wait to come home and celebrate and tell us about one thing or another, or sing songs, or go to sleep singing songs. And it's really great, I'll call it joyous spirit, not because I get from listening to them. And of course, this comes from our children who have, my son and son-in-law who enrolled them in this program. So it really is a joy to see this celebration. You have continued to move that forward. So to you, good job. And we appreciate that. I appreciate everyone on Zoom joining us today. Brian, thank you for moderating. Threw him the last minute and he jumped right in as he always does. Really helped out. So thank you all. I do have, I'm gonna go away from my microphone here for my picture for a minute. For those people that are here, not for the Zoom crowd, there are some books here that you're welcome to. This comes from a speaker we had on Zoom a while back. It's called Place in the Tent. It's an intermarriage in conservative Judaism. They're free copies if you're interested in reading more about that. This is from a professor. Let's see if I remember her name. Oh, well. She didn't. She was. She had a speaker here, and Rose Levinson. Rose Levinson. So they're her books, and you're welcome to them if anyone would like them. So thank you very much today, everyone, for participating.